prosecutors when they come after you, and how the media isn't a watchdog.
Would you in the good
See,
thing?
I think the problem is that we don't have a media that is a watchdog. They're like sheep. You know, I sit on the city council floor on a number of things about the prosecution, and they didn't mention one word of it because I think they're scared of the federal office. I think they realize they could come after them, and that they get scared, and so they just don't do the kind of reporting that needs to be done in order to keep a balance between the government and the people.
Start personal.
Good. So yeah. So we're now going to we're going to be on in 5 seconds.
You got it? Is it recording?
Yes, it is.
Did you press record?
Yes, thank you. So thank you for joining us for AHA, which stands for Human Among Humans, and we have
right.
quite a human here tonight. This is Chuck Turner, who's been on the Boston City Council for how long?
7 years.
And was an activist before and will be after.
Yes.
And we're going to just go over what moved you to first run for the Boston City Council?
Well, I have been an activist for a number of years in Boston. I had taken a break in a sense and had for the last 10 years before running for council been a counselor and a manager at Emerge in Cambridge.
And Emerge and tell us, those are the people that love us, right? In that
Emerge is an organization in North Cambridge that was formed in the 70s to provide counseling service to those who batter their partners. And so I became a counselor at Emerge in 1991, and then I became a manager a year later and stayed until I ran for city council.
And what was it that moved you to go from there to city council? And that was the Boston City Council.
The
not
Boston
Cambridge.
City Council.
Yes.
The really motivation was that I had been working with Siddiqui Cambone of the Black Community Information Center while I was working at Emerge. I was working as a volunteer with Siddiqui and others trying to stimulate organizing in Boston. And what we were finding was that while there are a number of issues, the fact that the Menino administration was spreading resources in the community, which is what you want, but the price he was asking was that everybody keep silent about any issues of difference of opinion with his administration. So Sadiq and I were trying to really pump up the volume of the community voice, and so not with a lot of success. And so when the opportunity came to run for city council, my wife and I said, well, this is a good opportunity to see if we could use the office to inject a greater level of organizing into the community.
And you won the first time?
Won the first time. The mayor's candidate was the candidate who was opposing me in the final election, and I think my plurality was 60% to 40%.
Wow. And what part of Boston was this?
This is District 7. District 7 includes all of Roxbury, all of Lower Roxbury, parts of Fenway, Dorchester, and the South End.
And you've been continually reelected since then?
Continually reelected
Why?
Since then. Well, I have a long history of working in the community, so people knew of the work I had done, and I think that was the basis of their deciding to elect me, despite the fact that there were 11 other candidates in the preliminary election. The other issue in terms of the continuation of the election is that I presented a model of representation that was very different, not only in District 7, but in the city, in that I had said that I wanted to use the office to not only hold hearings and to move legislation forward and provide constituent services, but to also be an organizing base for the community. And so part of that strategy required the development of an office in the community, which we opened in November of '99 when I was elected, and that we maintained until about 3 weeks ago. In November, we closed it down, given the conviction that we'll talk about later.
That will be in the show following this. Lloyd Smith, who we know and love, is going to talk about what the conviction that Chuck just
referenced.
just talked about. But we're now going to be celebrating all the accomplishments Chuck has done for so many of us on this show. So what was it like first coming into the council?
It was it's hard to say. In fact, it's even hard to really remember the initial experience on the council. What I do remember was the memories that are most vivid from those first few months are the memories of holding what we call the District 7 round table. That is every month beginning in March of 2000, the first year I was elected, until about 2008, we held monthly meetings at the First Church in Roxbury that focused on issues of concern to the community and to activists throughout the city. So we would focus 1 month on housing issues and the question of how to create more affordable housing. We focused another month on domestic violence and what the community needed to do in terms of coming to grip with the issue of violence toward women and children. We had roundtables on the military budget. We began to look at the military budget in 2000 and its effect on the community, which was very helpful because as the Bush administration kept moving the amount of money we were investing in war up, we were able to track it in the community because we had laid a foundation of understanding about how the military budget fit into the overall budget and how it affected the spending for local priorities. So those first few months were really filled with trying to move forward this new organizing model, and people were tremendously appreciative. We had, I'd say, 50 to 75, sometimes 100 people at these District 7 roundtable forums, and we had an interesting feature that we would end the meeting with a lunch that would last for a couple of hours, provided by myself and my wife as part of our office budget. And so it was very exciting, and activists came from around the city, and so it was a dialogue where the core of the people were from the district, but where there were activists from other neighborhoods who were looking at the issue from the standpoint of how it tied into the work they were doing.
Well, this sounds wonderful. Have other people on the council imitated this in any way?
Nah.
Nobody?
No, the councilors have offices that they open during the election time in order to have a base in the community to run from, and those are shut down afterwards. The councilors then, in general, will have an organization or organizations provide space where they can have office hours in the community and come in and talk with people. But there are no other councilors who opened an office with full-time staff that would be that are financed, in my case, by the city. But then we paid, my wife and I financed the office, the telephone, the heat, the light, just all the surrounding activities, and it costs us about $30,000 a year for the office, and the round tables were about $6,000-7,000 a year when we first getting started.
And what were some of the accomplishments, both in the first year and?
Well, we've had a number of accomplishments in terms of legislative accomplishments. I sponsored and was able to bring to a unanimous vote the first ordinance in the city of Boston banning discrimination against people based on gender preference that relates particularly to those who are known as transgendered persons, but it's generally an ordinance against discrimination based upon the person's gender choice. The state is now working on that legislation, but we passed it, I think, in 2005, 13-0 in the state. Is still, people in the legislature are still trying to get it through. We passed just a kind of a curious one. They were trying to license pets, license dogs, so people could rent dogs in Boston. A company was coming in to rent dogs. There were some activists, I think from Cambridge actually, who had been trying to get the state legislature to move the legislation forward, and they to ban that kind of inhuman practice, and they couldn't get any initial success with the legislature, and so they came to us, and we sponsored the ordinance to ban that practice in Boston. And once we had sponsored it, then the legislature became a little more interested in it. And eventually, about a year later, it passed. We passed an ordinance against.
Oh, just stop, let me stop for one moment. Why would people want to rent, why would they want to, either way, why would someone want to rent a dog?
It's beyond me. It as the company's kind of rationale was that people like to have pets, but they don't want to take responsibility.
I see.
You know, it really was that crazy, and that's one of the reasons why we thought it was so unreasonable to allow it to go on in Boston. Because if somebody doesn't want to take responsibility for a being,
Yes.
an animal is a being, not an object. And if you don't want to take responsibility for a being, then don't deal with it. And so our concern was that the way the pets would be dealt with would create anger and confusion, and so the next person to rent the pet would be dealing with an animal who was in tremendous turmoil because of the kind of life they would be living. And so we were successful in convincing the other counselors that it didn't make sense to them.
So
either.
you've been good at, even though you were acting differently than other counselors, you were able to, at least in these instances, get the counselors to agree with legislation you were sponsoring.
We also passed a legislation that required vendors who have contracts with the city of Boston to essentially use the same process in dealing with those who have criminal records that the city had adopted, so that those who had criminal histories would, as they went into the companies doing business with Boston, wouldn't be their history wouldn't be the focus. There would be a process that would enable the company to make sure that if they were dealing with the elderly, disabled, youth, that they would check the queries. But otherwise, as the city's policy is, we don't check the queries.
Wow.
unless they are going to be dealing in an unsupervised way with those other categories. And so we're able to get the mayor to sign an ordinance adopting the city's policies for our vendors. The compliance with it is rough, and we're still working on it, but we put a framework in place that really is leading the nation from our perspective.
And even though this is Cambridge, you will explain to some people what a quarry is.
The Criminal Offender Record Information System is known as the State Criminal Offender Record Information System, is known by the initials CORI. It was developed in 1972 ironically, as a protection for the privacy of the information of those who were incarcerated. But over the years, the regulations have become looser and looser, so that by the early 1900s, almost anybody could get not anybody, but businesses had great ease at getting that information. They were using the information to essentially discriminate, say, no, you've got a criminal record, we don't want to consider you.
And you've done some work for people in prison, yes?
We've done support work trying to help families make the connections and the conditions that the families would face as they went into those settings would be positive, that there would be books for the children to read, and essentially trying to argue and then create practices where there would be a sense of humanity, that the people who are arrested have committed a crime, and they need the society needs to figure out a strategy to deal with them, but to help them regain their sense of humanity. What happens in prison is that prisons are almost designed to destroy a person's sense of humanity, and so we were trying to reverse that kind of practice on the part of the administration. We also, though, responded to a call from Old Colony where some men said that they really would like to make amends